Hey, welcome to another exciting edition of the Shoe Show. You know, Thomas, a lot of people, when they think back on their lives, know exactly where they were when they heard about the Kennedy assassination or some kind of monumental moment in history. I can tell you exactly where I was when I learned in 2009, it was May, of the first ever Prop 65 notice that went out to a footwear company. It was a shoe sold at Walmart, pre-walker, kind of infant shoe, made by, at the time, Brown Shoe Company. I'm dating all of us now, Caleres. And that was the moment, like the time-space continuum in product safety and footwear split in two. And we looked into this future where we would be heavily regulated on the chemical side and need trusted partners to guide us through just all the chaos. And so I'm excited about today's episode because our friends who are joining us have a ton of expertise. They work with us on a lot of this. They're basically one of our top labs that we refer members to. And so who's on Shoe Show today? And then let's get to it.
We are very excited to bring in Eurofins. We've got our friends Pratik and Devender, who are going to be getting into some really interesting issues related to product safety, chemical safety. But, we're talking about it at the beginning. There's a lot of people that listen to the show that are, we have executives that listen to it. We have people that do compliance, all types of footwear professionals. And there's a lot of people that are interested in the industry and want to learn more about it. And maybe not everybody knows, hey, what is a testing lab? What does a testing lab do? So I want to throw it to you guys, Pratik and Devender. Start us off. What do you guys do? Why is that important? Like, what does Eurofins do when it comes to footwear testing?
Yeah, I think kind of just building off of what Matt mentioned. I think in terms of I think one of the things is I still remember Prop 65, especially when I was living out of state, and then now I'm in the state, and so how crazy some of these things are. So I can definitely relate in terms of the challenges and at the same time some of the opportunities that it presents as well. But in terms of getting to your question, in terms of I think at the very basic, simple level, testing lab just helps brands make sure that the shoes they sell are safe, compliant, and perform the way that they expect and promise, right? So, at Eurofins in our footwear and softlines lab, that essentially breaks down into essentially three major buckets, right? So, first and foremost, your baseline is always going to be safety and compliance, right? So, we always want to make sure that the footwear that you sell are going to meet the regulations and the requirements, whether that's regulatory, sometimes it might be also retailer, and in the markets that you're offering it for sale, right? So US, Canada, Europe, and you kind of go across the globe and have different marketplaces. So that's kind of your baseline. Then you build on top of it your performance and quality, right? Because we wear the shoe not because they are safe or meeting that's just an expectation, but we like it because it looks good, it performs well. If you're in a running shoe or a hiking shoe or a safety shoe, whatever that might be, right? So we essentially simulate the real world use by flexing and abrasion and color fastness, and essentially the stimuli to evaluate and see, is it going to perform right in a lab in a controlled environment? And then essentially the last one is the data plus the guidance, right? So essentially a good lab, this is the approach that we take at Eurofins in terms of consumer product testing. It's not just about sending a report saying, hey, it passed or it failed, but essentially helping interpret the result. What does it color fastness grade mean? What does this tensile strength mean? If it's abrading, what does that mean? Flexing, all of those things, right? So in short, a lab like Eurofins becomes an extension of the brand's technical and compliance team. So we work with brands and be part of them.
Yeah, that's awesome. Pratik, you're based in California. Thank you for getting up this morning. We were talking about it in the green room before we started. I really do appreciate it. Obviously, I was just in California. You're inundated with these warnings, these Prop 65 warnings. I assume even just hanging out with you might expose me to cancer or reproductive harm. I don't know, but it's gotten kind of ridiculous. Now, Devender, you're on the other side of the planet. Walk us through kind of what your role is at Eurofins and maybe pick up on some of the threads that Pratik talked about as it relates to what are labs.
Yeah, definitely. So like Pratik mentioned about some very important topic about the quality and the performance of the shoes. But on the other side, as I'm sitting here, when we say this, that if you are making a shoes and you are talking to your manufacturers and you are telling them, I want my shoes in this way, then what our lab is saying this one, what you are asking that they are making in the same way or not. And then if they are not making in the same way or not, then we are checking in that way. Now, it's coming in the another side when we are saying this compliance and the quality, the both side. Why we need to check this? Because we don't know who is making the shoes for us. Sometimes the factories, which is far east, is making some kind of some raw materials for your shoes. We don't know them, and we are sending us some kind of a material which is unknown material for that shoes that is going to our factories, and we are using those material to making those shoes, and we have no idea who is sending those on. So we call this a supply chain mapping, and we have no idea who is sending those ones. So that's why we are doing those testing. We will call this the blank testing, where the material is coming inside the supply chain and you are using to make the shoes. And we are doing those testing, and we are saying this, that, yeah, these materials are compliance and these materials are good or bad, what is the quality and what is performance, what Pratik mentioned. So this is the another point what our labs are doing. We are having a kind of a eyes and ear of our brands when the material is entering in the supply chain, and what kind of chemicals they are using, if these chemicals are going in the environment in a proper way or not, if they use this one, how these chemicals are released in the water, how these chemicals goes in the air. So all these things are controlled by our lab. We are the, like I said, that on the sustainability side, on the manufacturing side. So we are working step by step, or you can say shoulder to shoulder with the brand, with their eyes and ears. This is what our labs are doing exactly.
So, you mentioned kind of the materials. There's so many materials that go into a shoe. We're looking at, it's the bill of materials and 60, sometimes 70 materials on there. I mean, it has to be a tremendous cost to make sure that you're testing and fully compliant with all. We'll even get into this in a second about all the different regulations that have come into effect. But I'm just wondering, from your perspective, are there ways that companies can reduce cost here when they're trying to do the right thing, make sure everything is tested and compliant, but there have to be efficient ways to do this so that you're not kind of reinventing the wheel? What's your suggestion on that?
Yeah, I think that you said it right, Thomas, in terms of, I think, are there efficient ways, right? So I think, is there a better or a smarter way to do testing, right? And as you've seen with the various restricted substances and so on and so forth, I mean, there are alphabet soup of chemicals, which I'm sure we'll get into. But each year, new substances or group of substances emerge that now we need to manage as they are getting regulated or could be regulated. And so as we stack more and more substances, the cost is, of course, going to increase, right? So the cost will increase, but are there ways that we can better manage the budget and be more efficient and smart in that way, right? So one, of course, the basic strategy always plays, right? In terms of, we want to make sure that we are, whenever possible, you are going as far upstream as Devender mentioned, right? The more upstream you can go and perform component testing, and also, build resilient supply chain where you're verifying the suppliers that they're using good chemistry, because when the good chemistry in means good chemistry out, right? So making sure that gets verified, then leveraging component part testing. And to address this specific, just taking chemicals as an issue, because that's where cost really adds up, right? You mentioned 60, 70 materials in a shoe, right? So it gets complex, and each component gets tested for a slew of chemicals. So it quickly can add up. Even though it could be, I'm just making numbers up, but let's say you just say like, oh, it's $1 for a substance. Now you have 70 substance this year, could be 90 substance next year, and just keep adding, right? So the cost keeps adding, right? So in order to be smarter about this, at Eurofins, we have our, what we call the chemical smart testing, ChemST, and that really helps. It's an innovative way of approaching restricted substances testing, because that's where you get a lot of cost. And so it helps manage your cost. At the same time, it gives you a lot more information, because the way we are approaching that testing is in a smarter, more efficient way. And so you get a lot more data testing fewer, same materials, but in a better way or a smarter way. So I think that's a good way to approach testing in order to at least be smarter and more cost efficient, even though, the cost, you'll kind of still see the cost increase over time.
Yeah, I like that, Pratik. I mean, Devender, one of the things that you may not be aware of, but as an organization, way back in the day, we established a restricted substance list, an RSL. We're actually partnering with you all as we update it currently. And one of the approaches has always been, and you talked about supply chain mapping, which is so critical, but it's also like chemical mapping. One of the mantras of a dear friend of mine who's since passed used to say, know your product, like know what's in it. And one of the challenges our members face is the fact that Prop 65 has 800 to 900 chemicals on the list. And so they're scratching their head saying, I'm getting these notices that I'm being sued for violating Prop 65 and not alerting California consumers of the supposed risks. And how am I supposed to judge which of these chemicals actually go into footwear production? We know lead, phthalates, chrome 6, et cetera. But beyond that, where is it located? How do I find it? So there's also a product mapping process, I think, that you all can help with, Devender. Correct me if I'm wrong, which helps us, helps our members, helps the industry understand you don't have to worry about all of them. Like you don't have to, not everything on that list is in a pair of shoes. Walk us through kind of how Eurofins partners to do that.
Yeah, that's a very, very important point, Matt, that you raised, because it's more than now, not 900, 800 is more than 1,000 substances.
Oh, the number went up as we record.
Yeah, so it's more than 1,000. And then as we are talking at this time, you never know, maybe some other chemicals are also added in that. Numbers are increasing there. It's crazy. It's crazy in the market. And everybody's asking how we are trying to help our customers, that how we do this one. So as you said, that the product profiles and the chemical supplies, they are very important to do that mapping. And we have that data, as Pratik mentioned, that we have a chemical screening programs, and we have some other program where we have our data. And this data contains around 80,000 chemicals auxiliaries, which is used in the different products in the textile and footwear industry. And from where we can see this, that what kind of chemicals are entering in the supply chain from which different category of the manufacturing, and we can control them. So from there, we find out that out of 1,000 substances, there are around 360 or 350 substances which are related to our textile and footwear industries, which can be not, because you cannot check more than 1,000 substances, is not possible. You have to verify some of these numbers. And then we find out that around 350 substances which is coming from this industry, and then we are screening for those 350 or 360 substances for our clients. And we are saying this, that if you are covering for these number of substances, your product is safe, because other substances are not related to this industry. They are related to the construction industries, or they are coming from pharma, they are coming from pharmaceuticals or other industries. But from the footwear and textile industry, these are the set of chemicals which are restricted, and let's comply and let's check only for these ones. So this is our way how we are dealing with this one and helping our customers and clients.
Yeah, so I think it's essentially, just with, in this now age of big data, essentially, it's essentially having the data and, using that and leveraging that for knowing what the materials are, what the substances are, and the probabilistic, right, in terms of what's your risk. So it's just like risk managing, risk mitigation in terms of, as Devender mentioned, these are the high risk or medium risk substances that you can find, right? And there are about a third or 2/3 of them that you would never see in a footwear supply chain.
Yeah, Prop 65 is really fascinating because it's such a broad list of chemicals that California has determined cause cancer, reproductive harm, known to the state of California, and you have to warn consumers about these chemicals, or you risk facing a Prop 65 lawsuit. And so what's interesting about that list is always growing. As you point out, it's 1,000 chemicals now. And I actually look for these sometimes. So if you're in the airport, you'll see it's just a little trinket, something will be a warning, cancer or reproductive harm. Or you go in an elevator or a restaurant in California, there'll be a sign on the door that says warning, cancer, reproductive harm. And, maybe there's an understanding, at least with California consumers, of what that means, but not everybody gets that, understands that. And so when these products, it's hard to separate it out. They may go to other parts of the country, these warnings, and be alarming to consumers to see that. But that's the way the California law is structured. Brands obviously have to comply with that. And so we're not going to go through, don't worry, we're not going to go through 1,000 chemicals right now. But how about a quick round where I'll throw a couple chemicals to you and you tell me the level of concern you have for the footwear industry right now, what you think about them. So what about vinyl acetate with Prop 65 now? Is that a big concern? Is that less of a concern for the industry?
I think I would say definitely there should be some concern because, and again, this is the Prop 65. The way it works is essentially, as you said, it's not a restriction. It's a, in quote unquote, it's a right to know requirement, right? So essentially you need to label, right? And so there are all some of these low hanging fruits of leads and phthalates, and now in many instances, Chrome 6 and so on and so forth. So that's majority of the enforcement. And then every year there's a new flavor that comes in, whether that's, Chrome 6, BPA, BPS, and it could be vinyl acetate. The key is in terms of it's used quite a bit in the footwear supply chain, right? So essentially, anytime you have all these foams and in many cases also coatings, adhesives and so on and so forth, you will see the use of vinyl acetate based material, right? So the EVA foam, PEVA, and all of those things. So its prevalence is there. So the potential is there. Now, the key part is going to be at what thresholds are they present, and is that something that the plaintiff's attorneys essentially pick up and say, at this point, we feel that this is a good enough case where we will just take these products and take it for a 60-day notice and through the whole Prop 65 process. So I think that's going to be the key question in terms of, because there is also not a safe harbor level. So there is no way to I know OEA is I think working on that to create that, but I think up until that, it's always going to be a little bit of challenge, right? So I would say it's definitely a concern. And I think first few days, or I would say first month, will give a good indicator in terms of what is it going to be like a floodgate, or is it going to be trickling of the 60-day notices? So I know with flame retardants back in almost like 5 to 10 years when they were listed, it just opened the floodgates for some of the industries. So it could be that. Let's hope not, but you just never know, I think. But so going back to your question, I would say it's definitely concerning, and it would be good to have an insight in terms of where those levels are, because we are using a lot of the vinyl acetate-based materials. So, just good to understand that in supply chain.
Can I throw out one more chemical? Just one more out of the 1,000. How about BPA, BPS? We've heard some talk on that lately. What is that? What's the concern there? What's the risk?
So I think BPA for sure. I think in terms of the athletic garments, you think about all the yoga apparel and so on and so forth, socks and all of those things, where the BPA was present in the polyspandex blend material. So that's where it got impacted. BPS was a little bit different. It got, of all the things, again, this is the uniqueness and the craziness of Prop 65 is any and everything is in the scope, right? In terms of if there's a potential for exposure, it's, it's something that needs to be considered. So BPS was not really footwear or apparel. It were all these, receipts and also tags. You see all those tags, which is giving you the size, price, sometimes if it's on a clearance, all of those things. And those were the things that got targeted for BPS. It's crazy. I went to a bank and a pharmacy, and they were both, giving me warning that, there's BPS in the paper receipt. So, that's how crazy it can be. But I think getting back to our industry, BPS, I think, is probably it's not as much. I haven't seen any enforcement for footwear or apparel yet, but where I've seen is essentially for all these paper receipts and also all these stickers and tags, right? So whenever you're looking, bisphenols are used in thermal printing, right? So that's why.
Was it a substitute? Am I right on that? Like BPS was supposed to originally, is that how it was originally supposed to be, like the substitute for BPA, and now BPS is the target? Is
exactly. That right? Yeah, that's essentially what happens. Essentially, this is like the jewelry kind of analogy, right? Where lead got restricted and then by cadmium.
Yep.
The same, like BPA, and then for thermal printing they moved to BPS, and now I think the plaintiffs essentially are saying don't go from BPS to BPF because BPF is not on Prop 65 list, but it's just a matter of time. And so if you go to BPF, then we'll unfortunately have to go back again for the same products to catch you for BPF, right? So it's a regrettable substitution. So their idea, or at least their recommendation urging is just go bisphenol free, especially for these type of thermal printing.
Yeah, I mean, and the way the system works, you mentioned enforcement and expectations around vinyl acetate enforcement in 2026, that this is enforced, this is citizen enforced. And so there are these firms that their whole business model is to basically shake down companies under the auspices of making everyone safer and making sure there's a slew of other labels out there for California consumers. And they actually go buy the product off the shelves and they test it, and then they just make a determination on who to go after. I do want to broaden out the aperture a little bit, Devender, as we bring you in kind of on a global scale. Are there certain trends out there as you work with your clients on chemical composition, et cetera, outside the United States that most of our companies sell globally? And so what are some of the things top of mind for you in the new year as it relates to kind of the global landscape around chemical safety and compliance?
In the chemical compliance set, the 2026, or you can say this is a new year, our main concern is coming from the recycled materials chemicals. We are working a lot because they are really, really problematic, because everybody is using those recycled material, which is coming from the PET bottles or coming from the consumer recycled textiles, because you never know how many times of this textile is recycled, how many lives they can live, and from which kind of era they are coming. At that time, nothing was restricted, and now they are getting contaminated to all the restricted material. So 2006, the whole of our concern is moving towards the recycled materials concerns. All the big clients and everybody is looking towards the whole global thinking is moving in that side, that how we use more clean recycled materials, how we use more clean green energies and everything. So these things are moving, and we are concerned more about those chemicals which are used to synthesize all these recycled material, which is a polyester, polyamides, acrylates, nylon 6,6, and different kind of, even what is happening with the recycled cottons, lanins, and all these ones. And this is a really concern for our the global one next year that we are facing. Pratik, you want to add something?
Yeah, I mean, I'll just give maybe a very. I think that's a good overview. I think, and then I'll just give a case in point example. PFAS. I think everyone's kind of like, again, PFAS.
Next sometimes on the list.
PFAS. But I mean, again, it's real, right? I think we want to. Everyone's focused on sustainability. Everyone has a sustainability journey, whether that's mapped out over next year or next 10 years. And part of that is always using some of the recycled content, because that's of course is a lot easier and a lot better for the environment as well. And PFAS is a good example where, up until 2 years back, essentially, 18 months, let's say, it wasn't really restricted, and it's really good at what it does. And so it was ubiquitous. And so now, if you say for the recycled material, you cannot really use any of it, and in the EU especially, where there is this overall PFAS restriction coming into play or being considered by the European Commission, one of the feedback that was provided by the industry was, if you start doing that, and also you want industry to use recycled material, how do you expect that the two things to kind of meet, right? So one of the things that we always try to educate, and again, this is more education, because sometimes, if things are built in vacuum, you don't really understand the repercussions. And so because of that, now there's at least a provision that if the PFAS overall restriction proposal goes in place, there is a 12 to 13 year phase out time if you're using recycled material. Otherwise, you can't really use recycled content. It's the same thing. It's a very good goal that we want to restrict PFAS, which are ubiquitous and have their own challenges. However, if you stop saying you can't use it from tomorrow, then how are you going to bridge that gap? And you're also going to make all of these products that are okay or were okay. I mean, you can go to your own, closet, and you might have a jacket that you bought 5 years or 6 years back. I'm sure it has PFAS on it. You're not going to throw it away, right? I mean, you're still going to use it. You can still go buy the stuff in Goodwill. So then why are the brands that are doing the right thing by using recycled content, why would they be punished, right? So I think getting that ramp off gives the time to brands to manage that. And at the same time, it also brings in sustainability as well. So I wanted to just share like an example of what Devender mentioned was like a much broader goal for the industry.
Yeah, no, it's the unintended consequences of regulations, right? And not thinking through, would you rather me just throw this into the garbage, or do you want me to extend the life of it? And I was thinking about you guys this weekend, before you feel endeared. I was standing in line at H&M buying a piece of clothing for one of my daughters, and they had a box by the register, and it says, dump your clothes in here to recycle with us, and you'll get a discount on a purchase. And I thought to myself, I'm having this conversation with the guys from Eurofins this coming week, and so I want to talk about this. So Pratik, the fact that you raised this before me even asking, it just shows it's top of mind for everyone, because the brands are trying to do right by their customer, by the environment. But sometimes you're going to have to, until you can cycle through all this and all that recycled material gets flushed out of the system, you're going to have to create a little bit more flexibility in some of this. And sometimes that's hard for regulators to understand, particularly in the European market.
Yeah, and I think I think it's important, and we probably should say this at the outset too, is brands are looking to do the right thing. We do a lot of work around sustainability. Andy Polk on our team leads that, and we have so many sustainability calls and conferences and events and resources. And I think it's important. And with the compliance side too, brands want to make, want to provide the education to consumers to make sure that chemicals are not, harmful chemicals are not in shoes. And that's why they have testing labs. That's why they do the testing. And so I think I think when we get into the technical side of the regulations, you made a great point about you want to get those right too, though. Everybody's got this shared goal of doing things better, but you don't want to make it so, okay, what do you do? Like PFAS, for example, what do you do with that? Like, where do you put that? You've got, it's got to be taken out of circulation, but it can't be recycled at some point. So does it go to landfill? Like, is that, what's the end result on that? That it creates some new challenges when you have legislation and there's a quick turn on of the switch for that legislation. I guess one more point I want to ask you is the brands that are testing, that they're trying to do the right things. Are there common mistakes you see though from brands just generally where, but maybe it's with how they're trying to test or things they're doing that they could do differently and maybe make it more efficient or better?
Okay, so what we are trying to do with the RSL, like what Matt mentioned, that restricted substance list. So this is until now our RSL testing is a pre-assumed testing. Pre-assumed testing means that we are doing the testing and we assume that it's in our material and we are testing for that. We are trying to change that little bit by our new testing methodologies. We are saying this when we do the non-targeted analysis. We are not thinking that what is there. We check for everything because it's at this time the supply chain and our chemistry is too complicated that we cannot go with that RSL. So I can give you one example for the BPA. In the RSL, if you see that our RSL is mentioning that BPA you should check on the plastics, because it's coming from the plastic materials or it's coming from the polycarbonate. But our chemistry testing is telling us that the BPA is coming from the dyes also. It's coming from a lot of resins also. So you cannot check only for the polycarbonate, because if you check polycarbonate and you miss the textiles, then it will pass through your filter of testing and it will give in the market. And then you will stuck in the California Prop 65. So we changed this pre-assumed testing to the non-targeted testing by using the new methodology called this chemical smart testing, where we are trying to cover all these things. And this is I'm not saying this is a mistake, but this is a way how the things are working from last 10, 15 years in the market. But now as the number of substances are increasing, a lot of increasing. Before it was very few, lead, phthalate, cadmium, chromium, and you have 10 or 15 tests and then you are done. But now Proposition 65, more than 1,000. If you go REACH SVSC, more than 250 substances. And if you go to CPSIA, CHCC, then Affirm RSL, AFA RSL, that how to cover all these things with that RSL and that approach that we are using the 10 years before. So we tried to educate our clients or educate our the customers that now we are changing a little bit of our thinking. We are going from pre-assumed testing to the non-targeted analysis, or we call this independent of metrics analysis, by using a little bit of a smarter way that we can test everything. And until we find out a lot of mistakes from our clients that they are using this RSL testing, and then they are missing a lot of chemicals because of the old methodology. So we are telling to our clients that we can change now our thinking and move to a different direction, that we can cover everything. This is what the answer to your question from my side, that this is a very old methodology because we never changed from last 10, 15 years. So it's time to deal with all these regulations. So I'm not saying that our methodology is perfect, but we are changing and trying to get everything under that control.
That makes sense. Pratik, you got the last word, my friend. Close us out.
Yeah, I mean, one of the other thing I would say, again, it's more of an opportunity, I think, is in terms of leaving the testing to the very end. I think it's probably not the best way. It shouldn't be like checkbox, right? I think saying, oh, I did the testing at the final stage, right? I think if you find an issue or a problem, it becomes too late, right? And that can lead to delays or, stock not being compliant. So the better approach is to bring the chemical consideration or even just performance and safety testing into design and sourcing, and use that as essentially your building blocks, right? So not just testing using our smart chemical testing, but also, the MRSL, where you can use the factory, qualify the factory chemicals and so on and so forth, and make sure they're using good chemistry. Other thing is just, especially now with, CPSCE filing, same thing with the DPP and all of those things. The idea is everything, we want to digitize the information. And so why not leverage that, right? So instead of it just being a PDF test report, use that data and the data elements to feed back into your, again, design and development process. So you know where things went wrong and maybe regions or suppliers or materials, and help that kind of, in your iterative process to always get better and improve over a period of time. So I think, again, using these as opportunities and viewing chemical testing, performance testing as kind of, a broader chemical management strategy, I think will lead to fewer surprises, and also will will lower the long-term cost, and also help build stronger relationship with, whether that's with you, whichever your suppliers are, testing partners are, and so on and so forth. And that'll help build the consumer trust.
Yeah, and that's key, right? No surprises, building consumer trust. I think that's what our brands want to do every single day. Pratik and Devender, thank you for coming on and sharing your insights and your wisdom with our audience. I just shut Thomas off. He had a list of about 15 chemicals he was going to ask you about, but we tamped that down to just the 3. And what we'll do is drop the link to the website in the description of the episode, so those who are interested can follow up and go to the website. Again, gentlemen, thank you for coming on the program today.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you
Thanks,
so
Matt.
much.
Thanks, Thomas.
Yeah, this has been another exciting edition of the Shoe and Show. You know what? We dive into the deep end of the pool, if you will, on issues that impact the business of our industry. And so we hope that you found value in this conversation. You can go to fdra.org to find out more about all the things that we do in this year, 2025 and beyond. It's been a year like none other, let me tell you. And in addition to that, go to shoeandshow.com for all of our episodes, over 500 now in the catalog, where we're breaking down all the different topics impacting our industry. And we appreciate you joining us. Join us next week for another exciting edition. Until next time, Shoe and Show is out.
Shoe In has been brought to you by the FDRA, the Footwear Industries Association focused on retail, trade, politics, and fashion, helping create and enhance conversations on all things footwear. For information about FDRA, visit fdra.org.